If you have seen my video on the crazy economics of dictatorships, you know that 2021 was the 16th consecutive year of decline in global freedom. This decrease in democratic values and their implementation is happening all over the globe and to varying degrees. In political science, this is called democratic backsliding. This means that hybrid regimes that incorporate some democratic characteristics, as well as fully democratic governments, are moving towards a more autocratic type of regime. And this is becoming increasingly relevant in today's political and economic context. The economic performance of a country and its propensity to plunge into chaos with an autocratic leader taking the ropes and diminishing the freedoms that democracies provide are intrinsically interlinked. How exactly that is the case will be exactly what we're looking at today. So I want to warmly welcome you to Rebel Economics, a channel dedicated to all things related to economics and business. Today, we will be talking about political economy, one of my favorite things ever, so I hope you're as excited as I am. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe. I know everyone always says so, and by now we turn deaf to those pleas, but your support is the reason we are doing this channel, so any thumbs up really helps. But now, back to the topic of democratic backsliding, because that is why you're here today. Now, the careful listener will have heard me say that this topic is becoming increasingly relevant today, forming small furrows over their brows as they question my knowledge on this topic. But hold on, let me explain. You're right, countries going from more to less democratic systems and vice versa has been happening for centuries. After the First World War, a democratic government, the Weimar Republic, was formed in Germany, only to then be overthrown by Hitler, going from a weak but inherently democratic system to an absolute dictatorship. And then, after the Second World War, while the west of the country continued its democratic trajectory, East Germany was plunged into chaos as the Russians implemented a communist regime which is mostly considered a totalitarian dictatorship. Only after the fall of the Berlin Wall did Eastern Germany get to taste the sweet nectar of democracy once more. Now yes, Germany is an extreme example. The swings from democracy to total dictatorship are quite extensive, but this is the tale of the time. In history, we have seen periods of democratic reversal that overall can be grouped into three waves. The first wave was Europe between the two world wars. The interwar period saw the rise of fascism through Hitler and Mussolini, as well as a dictatorship emerging in Spain under Franco after his victory in the Spanish Civil War. The second wave is characterized to have taken place in the mid-1950s to mid-1970s in Latin America. Look at the rise of Castro in Cuba or Videla in Argentina. By the late 1970s, 17 out of 20 Latin American nations were ruled by dictators. An incredible breakdown of democracy. But Latin America shows us that there is hope, because 20 years later, 18 countries had replaced the iron fist with functioning democracies. But why then am I so focused on it being important now, today? Because what we saw in the past was not democratic backsliding, it was a full breakdown of democracy. The important difference here is that the means in which this happens are very different. When it comes to the breakdown of a democracy, there's typically three ways in which this can go. Firstly are coups d'etats by military or state elites, as not only changing the political system, but also changing the leader. Other versions include executive coups, in which a freely elected chief executive suspends the constitution, amassing power in one sweep. And lastly, open election day fraud, in order to affect the outcome of the election, and thereby, once more, gaining power in one quick, decisive, and victorious action. But what we see today is significantly different. A regime is not overthrown, and election fraud, while present, does not amass all power in one person in one go, or at least not that frequently. Democratic backsliding has transformed the process from obvious quick-paced power grabs to more covert operations of undermining the opposition, slowly diminishing key democratic features, and repressing democratic values. The toolbox for democratic backsliding is far more diverse, including some of the core strategies like rigged elections, diminishing the access to media for competing parties, repressing civil liberties, and decreasing the existing checks and balances to executive power. After all this politics talk, and this channel being called Rebel Economics, you may ask where the economics of it all finally comes to play. Well, people much smarter than me have written about exactly this, so let me introduce you to Tomini and Wageman. They arrived at two major causal pathways, which can explain parts of democratic backsliding. They are called crisis-based model and opposition-based model. The two key characteristics here are the internal and the external threat. So, let's start with the crisis-based model. The first ingredient for the backsliding of democracy is a lack of economic development. There's a strong and consistent relationship between higher income and both democratization and democratic survival. With economic prosperity, people have gained economic liberties. They now have disposable income, which they can actually choose how to spend, rather than all being spent on necessities for survival. This freedom is often paired with a want for more liberties in other sectors too, therefore promoting democratic principles as these promote and protect such freedoms. But without economic development, all of this is not possible. Now, this does not immediately mean the descent into dictatorship, but it is one vital factor, especially when paired with strong differences within the population. These can be either of an ethno-linguistic nature, meaning competing ethnicities and languages being prevalent in one country, or socioeconomic. When a pending economic crisis and internal fractures come together in a government where a lot of power is already centralized, it leads to the perfect storm for more repression. Examples of this are the declaration of a state of emergency in India by the government of Indira Gandhi in 1975, or Peru in the late 1980s when the government was responsible for abuses and restricting civil liberties in the face of instability and protests. As we see in those examples, there was no coup d'etat, no overthrowing of the government, no rigged elections. But nonetheless, in the face of economic stagnation, civil liberties were restricted, causing some democratic backsliding. This is what we have seen on the graph as the internal threat. When this is then paired with an inability of the government to deal with the existing economic crisis, the opposition will be disloyal to the existing government structure and likely take their chance to overthrow the government. This would then be what is described as a democratic breakdown, the type that is seen less often nowadays. Secondly, we have the opposition-based model. This has the same two key ingredients as the crisis-based model, namely a lack of economic development or full-on economic crisis, and internal divisions based on ethnic, linguistic, or socioeconomic lines. Oftentimes, when a country experiences strong ethnic divisions, their socioeconomic divisions will be along the same ethnic lines, further exacerbating the fracturing of society. However, in this scenario, the threat to democracy is not the government reacting to the economic crisis per se, but it reacting to the growing opposition. When the government is seen as incapable to deal with the crisis causing poverty and hardship for millions of its citizens, of course they will favor the opposition. And with democratic processes in place, the population is perfectly capable in doing so. So if the government does not diminish liberties, as seen in scenario 1, it is likely that the governing party sees the looming threat of the opposition taking over. Fearing the growing strength of the opposition and its propensity to form a government with authoritarian tendencies or abuses of power, the government must either act in the same manner itself, or have to watch how it loses its power. You can guess which one they are most likely to choose. This can be seen in the case of the Philippines, where during the 2004 elections, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo's administration used the powers of the executive to rig the elections as a response to growing political opposition. Again, we have a rigging of elections, a strategy of democratic backsliding, rather than open election day fraud, which would be more akin to a democratic breakdown. Here too, you have the additional step which could lead to a democratic breakdown, when the military takes action against the inept government in favor of the opposition. This would then be a full-on military coup d'etat, like in the good old days when it was more simple to see when countries are straying from the path of democracy. The lack of economic development or pending economic crisis are a main ingredient for democratic backsliding. It creates a perfect storm which forces the government to act in more authoritarian ways in order to try and keep a handle on the economic downturn. And over short term, that might actually be a good strategy. More centralized governments have shorter decision-making processes and can therefore work more efficiently and act more decisively. However, often they are unlikely to give up that power they gained, leading to a further corrosion of democratic principles and practices. Thanks for watching Rebel Economics. I know today's video was very heavy on politics, but the intertwining of politics and economics is so important, so I think this video really warranted it. I hope you guys agree. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. We have lots more content, some with a political focus, others purely economic, as well as videos that analyze the economics of pop culture like Disney or Pokemon. So there really is something for everyone. Why not check out some of the videos now? Thanks for watching and see you next time here in Rebel Economics.